This is Christine Clapp from Spoken with Authority, and today with my team of experts, we are going to talk about the lessons we've learned in the last year. It's early March 2021, and it's now been an entire calendar year since the COVID pandemic has caused us to do almost all of our work online. Today, we're going to be sharing our insights and our lessons learned on how we have been doing online training, online teaching, online coaching. To start us off, let's hear from David and then Lynn.
So with regard to doing things online, I'm not in love with this new format, but I'm getting used to it. I think the hardest thing for me is how I'm used to talking to people because I rely so much on visual and verbal cues that only take place when you're in the same room as someone. Staring into this little green dot on my computer, literally, I think I was like this when I first started doing it. I'm learning to relax a little bit more. One trick that I found can help me if you're really struggling with it is, as crazy as it sounds, if you just have a person sit on the other side of the computer, if you have meetings that are really important to you, where you want to come across as personal, it helps to have that physical presence there. So otherwise it's just super awkward. But I think what you have to do is just practice and look at yourself when you're doing it. I've had the blessing of cursive having to do that on TV and you're like, man, look how I'm coming across. I don't like that. Then you also learn the other trick is when you're not speaking, but you're still on the camera, how to have a resting face that makes it look like you're a pleasant person. So I think I'm getting down my little smile. Sometimes I like the little smirk better, but these things help people know that you're a friendly, warm person, and it makes a difference in your presentations.
Absolutely. And David, when I used to work on the Hill early in my career, I did communications for a couple of years on the Senate side and a couple of years on the House side. So I had a senator and a representative who I worked with. And oftentimes when there would be votes and someone couldn't go back to the state or the district to give a presentation or a speech at an important event, we would have to record it or record a greeting to a group who we couldn't attend their special event. And it was so hard to have that warm conversational feeling. And that's exactly what I would do is I would sit on the other side of the camera. Instead of just looking into a camera, my member could talk to me and it made it so much better. And if you can get a collaborator to sit on the other side of the camera so that you can look at them toward the camera, it really does make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Lynn, what are your tips and what are your lessons learned on the last year of online everything?
It continues to evolve so much. What I think my biggest takeaway and one word I would use is to be forgiving with yourself and to the people that you're presenting to, because this is nothing like what we've done before. Even the distinction between looking directly into the camera so that you're talking to people this way, and then changing your gaze because you want to see people's expression and get some feedback from that, the verbal cues that David was talking about. Well, you can't do both when you're doing a Zoom meeting, and you have to accept that. You just have to accept that. That's just the deal. With my students, I have become more forgiving about the fact that some of them are interacting with me on their cell phones instead of sitting down in front of a computer. And that means that their presentation is going to be different. Their physical presence will be different because either they have their phone in their hands or sometimes they're walking around. And frankly, the people who are walking around may be able to be more present than the ones who are stuck in their chair. So there are a number of things I've had to accept and learn as we go forward with this process so that we can always be engaged and try to limit some of the Zoom fatigue.
Absolutely. Lynn, I'm really glad that you brought up this notion of people coming and joining group sessions with different levels of ability in terms of you might not have the functionality based on the phone or you're standing or you might be multitasking. And I do think it's important to do a really good job as a facilitator to try and get 100% of someone's capability to interact. And it's different for everyone, to your point, based on what your technology is, if you're sitting, if you're standing, if you're joining in these certain circumstances. But just like you said, to be welcoming of people and to encourage them to do 100%, whatever that looks like them at that moment in time on that day. So thank you for reminding us to be flexible and welcome everyone and just acknowledge that where they are at is exactly where they need to be, and we'll take whatever they can give. Michele, what about you?
Some of my comments really mirror Lynn's when you talk about flexibility and agility. As speakers, we're used to showing up and being quote unquote the performer. You come into the room, you get mic'd up. If you have materials to distribute, you have someone helping you. Now we are the actor, director, and producer. And when you talk about forgiveness, you have to just make sure that you try to cover all of those bases, and then forgive yourself for what's not perfect and keep the main thing the main thing. So in short, that's what I would say.
I appreciate that. We have to definitely make the main thing and don't get too overwhelmed with the details, because it's easy to with all the technology and the polls and the this and the that and the backgrounds. So it is important just to say, here's the key thing. Let me have fidelity to that. So let the rest of it go. Lisa, tell us about your tips and strategies for online communication.
I love to go after people and see how the themes kind of weave together, and we're sort of variations on the same ideas. And so I guess I want to start, though, by saying that the first thing that comes to mind for me when I think about this past year is remembering that no matter what we do, whether it feels like one-way communication or feels like a conversation, it's about people. Everything that we do, everything that we care about doing is about being with other people. And so that's about communication, and that's about connection, and that's about relationship. So remembering that, and remembering, I guess, this year that everybody comes in carrying more than we can see. In one way or another, everybody on the other side of what we're doing is carrying more than we can see. So I'm talking to myself, I hope to be really tuned into that, to really look inward and be bringing my best self for the situation, and to recognize that other people are carrying things we don't know. And so just to be a really deep listener in every setting, even when I'm primarily a speaker, to really be paying attention to what I take in from people. And that makes me think of some really concrete strategic things for us as communication people and people who help others communicate. And I'm a little bit on the flip side of what Lynn said. So yes, to be absolutely forgiving and understand our limitations, but also I realize that I want to maximize what's available to me and encourage other people to do that. So if I have to be on my phone, I have to be on my phone, and that's the best I'm going to be able to do. If I'm at home, use the biggest screen available to you. That I really had that recommended to me, and I really recommend it to people. The biggest screen I have available to me increases the chances that I feel like I'm with all of you and I can see you, and I don't miss your facial expression, and I don't miss that the person in the corner of my screen was trying to get somebody's attention to say something. So if I have the ability to set myself up that way to do that, and that I care how I show up. So again, if I can't do anything about my background or where I am or how I'm dressed, then I have to let that be, but also not to get used to that and say, man, it doesn't really matter. Because when I have the wherewithal to do something about it, I want to call upon myself to do that, because that tells people how much I've put into that interaction and caring about being there and kind of fully arriving. So we can't always do it, but when we can, I hope that that's what I do.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
I love that tension between this is what I'm capable of in terms of it can be really hard, and this is what I'm capable of in terms of pushing myself to be better. And it's always like this tension. And some days it goes more this way, and some days it goes more this way. But we're always having that. Jean would love me to call it a dialectic. Jean, tell us about your recommendations and your lessons learned.
I guess a dialectic is not a bad way to think about it. I think that my reflection on this year is that I don't terribly miss being around hordes of strangers. I really very much miss being physically present with my friends and family and students and coaching clients. But at the same time, I have learned that these virtual interactions and engagements can be meaningful, they can be valuable, and they can even be intimate in a way. You really can establish rapport with someone doing one-on-one coaching. I have one class with 100 students, And it really is that thing about teaching to a blank screen, not seeing any of their faces. But I know they're there. I can see the list of their names. They chat things. And I've found ways to use asynchronous tools to interact with them better. And so I use a little journal tool that's a private way of communicating. And I tell them, email me about some kinds of things, but if you want to tell me about a challenge you're facing or anything personal, use this tool, and I go to this tool in the right frame of mind to take in and interact on that kind of information. And I found that they really appreciate that, and that it feels like we're really communicating in a much more personal way. So I hope that as we come out of all of this and go back to more in-person meetings, we'll still maintain the ability to use the virtual tools, the technological tools effectively to help even more people.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think that before COVID, people always saw the online experience as being lesser. And I think that we've proven that it doesn't have to be. There are ways to make it special. There are ways to make it intimate. And there are ways to make it amazing. It's not the same ways, but it's absolutely possible to do it. It's not easy, but it is possible to do it. And that definitely dovetails with my lessons learned. And my 2 lessons learned is that attendance is better at online training. More people come. Jean, you did a program at Marcon. We had more people at that training than I had ever met at Marcon in all of the years that we worked with them. They came out of the woodwork, and there are people who dialed in, to Lynn's point, they dialed in from their phone because they were at a client site and they didn't have access to Teams based on the security protocols. They were there though. They made it. And if we went in person to their office in Falls Church, we would not have had that outcome. David and I did the New York City Bar Association. I was in DC. He was in Texas. And we had over 900 people register. It was more than they'd ever had register for an online event. There's no way that we would have had 900 people come in person to an event. So attendance is better. People can go. To Lynn's point, not everyone is going to have the ability to do as much interaction as they might if they were in person. But as a facilitator, it's up to you to push and to, think about that dialectic of how far can I push someone who's on a phone and dealing with their child while they're listening to this training? How do I make it the best for them? What can they do to get value out of this experience? And then the second thing I would say to my lessons learned is that webinars are less taxing overall than in-person training. Being in person is easier for me because, to Michelle's point, you have IT professionals to help. You have someone else to do handing out the materials, or maybe to help you co-facilitate from the organization you're working with. And when you are doing a webinar, it's all you. You have to do all of the pieces of it. So, and when you're in person, I personally tend to get a bigger lift of adrenaline from the energy in the room. Not to say that I don't get that online, but it's just bigger when it's in person for me personally. But the big difference is the travel. Before COVID, I would be on a plane, a train, or fighting DC traffic and parking 3-4 times a week. And that's exhausting. Now I could do 5, 6, 7 webinars, coaching sessions a week where I have so much more energy for doing the work. And I still have so much energy for my family and my friends and all the other parts of my life. So I would say the online experience is definitely one where it's harder for me energy-wise during the session, but overall, I can do so much more. And to your point, Jean, we can help so many more people when we're not spending all the time traveling and parking and doing that type of work to do all in-person work. So I do hope that we get back to having in-person, but I do expect and hope that we will have a very good, healthy portion that is online in the future when we're all vaccinated and COVID is in the rearview mirror. Thanks, everyone, for sharing your strategies as we remember the 1-year anniversary of being in the pandemic, and also remembering all of the heartaches and the struggles and the loss that people have had in this year. So I want to recognize that as well. And thank you. And thank everyone in our community for being part of our community, and I congratulate you for getting this far. And keep strong, keep wearing your mask, and we'll get through this.